Tommy burst through the cabin door, and the blizzard came in with him. He didn't just have snow in his hair, he had ice, caked to his eyelashes, freezing his jacket stiff. His face was white, not from the cold, from pure, undiluted terror. "Mama," he gasped, his voice cracking. "There's a man by the creek, I think. I think he's dead." Behind him, his 6-year-old sister Lillian stood frozen, a statue of wool and fear. Her red mittens were pressed hard against her mouth, holding back a scream. Clara Brennan's hands stopped moving. She'd been kneading bread, trying to work warmth into the dough, into the room, into their lives. But at Tommy's words, her hands froze. The warmth fled. Her blood ran colder than the wind outside. Not again. The words echoed in her skull. Not like Jacob. She didn't ask questions. She ripped her shawl from the peg, the one Jacob had given her, and shoved her bare feet into his old boots. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it," she commanded. But Tommy, his face grim, grabbed the old lantern. "I'm coming." She looked at her son, just 8 years old, trying to be the man of the house, trying to fill boots that were impossibly large. "Lillian, lock the door after us. Do you hear me? No matter what you hear." Lillian just nodded, her eyes wide as saucers. Clara and Tommy stepped out into the white hell of a Montana blizzard's aftermath. The wind didn't just blow. It screamed. It clawed at her face, a physical, hateful thing. Snowdrifts weren't drifts. They were mountains. Waist deep, hiding the world she knew. The familiar territory was gone, replaced by a frozen, alien tomb. Tommy held the lantern high, but the weak yellow light was swallowed by the swirling white. "Where?" Clara shouted over the wind. "By the cottonwood. Where? Where we found Papa's hat." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Of course, the universe had a cruel sense of humor. The exact same spot. They fought through the snow. Every step was a battle, the icy powder sucking at her boots, trying to pull her down, to make her stay, to make her join Jacob. It took them 10 minutes to go 100 yards, and then Tommy stopped. He pointed a trembling, mittened finger. There. Clara saw it, a dark shape against the white. Not just a man. A hulk. He was face down in a snowbank, half submerged in the ice-choked creek. His coat was fine wool, the kind she hadn't seen since she left St. Louis, the kind that meant money. But it was torn, ripped to shreds at the shoulder, and the snow around him wasn't pure white. It was pink, then red, then a dark frozen rust. Wolf marks. The pack had gotten to him. Clara's first instinct, the one that had kept her and her children alive for 2 years, screamed at her. Danger. Walk away. Strangers mean trouble. Strangers mean death. But Lillian had followed them. Clara didn't even know how. The girl was silent as a ghost. She slipped past them, small and quiet, and knelt in the bloody snow. She reached out a tiny, red-mittened hand, and she touched the man's frozen hair. "Mama," Lillian whispered, her voice snatched by the wind. "He's cold. He's so cold. Just like Papa was." That broke her. The knife that was Jacob's memory twisted in her chest. 2 winters. 2 years of finding him, frozen solid by the fence line he'd been trying to mend. His eyes open, staring at the sky. Too late. Always too late. "Help me," Clara whispered, the words stolen by the storm. Tommy, bless his heart, didn't hesitate. He grabbed one of the man's arms. Clara grabbed the other. He was dead weight. A mountain of a man, soaking wet and frozen stiff. "We can't," Tommy grunted, his feet slipping. "We will," Clara hissed, planting her feet. "Pull. Pull like your life depends on it. Now." They dragged him. It was a nightmare. They pulled him through the drifts, his heavy boots carving twin trails in the snow. Twice Clara fell, plunging her arms up to the elbows in the icy water of the creek. She didn't feel the cold. All she felt was a burning, desperate rage. She would not be too late again. It felt like hours. By the time they reached the cabin, they were both sobbing from exertion. Lily-Ann, still silent, scrambled ahead and unlocked the door. They fell through the entryway, dragging the man with them. He hit the wood floor with a sickening solid thud. They wrestled him onto her narrow cot by the fire. It was the only bed, apart from the children's loft. He was a mess. Blood was frozen in his hair, on his temple. His lips were blue. Clara ripped his fine coat open. His shirt was soaked. Tommy, the quilt, all of them. Lily-Ann, bolt that door. Now. Clara worked with a desperate, frantic energy. She cut away his wet clothes with her skinning knife, her hands shaking so badly she almost sliced his skin. He was covered in bruises. His ribs were a dark, mottled purple. Someone had beaten him badly, before the wolves even found him. She covered him with every blanket they owned, and as she did, his eyelids fluttered. A gasp, thin and reedy, escaped his blue lips. He said a single word, a name. Elizabeth. And then, nothing. Stillness. Clara bolted the door herself, ramming the heavy wooden bar into place. Outside, as if on cue, the wolves began to howl. Not distant, close. They were singing for the meal she had stolen. She pressed her back against the solid wood, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Tommy's voice was small, terrified. From the ladder to the loft. "Mama, what if he's a bad man?" Clara looked at the stranger, battered, blood-soaked, helpless, human. "Then we'll face it together," she said, her voice sounding braver than she felt. "But a man can't be bad if he's dead, and he's close." She moved to the fire, her hands finally shaking so hard she had to clasp them together. "Lord," she whispered to the flames, "don't let me regret this." The stranger's eyes snapped open. They weren't dull. They weren't clouded. They were a vivid, shocking blue, and they were wide with pure animal terror. Before Clara could even gasp, his hand shot out. He grabbed her wrist. His grip wasn't weak. It was iron. It was the grip of a man clinging to life, and it hurt. "They tried to kill me," he rasped, his voice like gravel and blood. Don't let them know I'm here. Don't let them find me." Then his eyes rolled back. He collapsed again, his hand falling away, leaving red-purple marks on her skin. Clara stared at her children, who were huddled together on the loft ladder. What, in God's name, had she just dragged into their home? His name was Grant. Or at least, that's what he muttered. He thrashed in her bed for 3 days and 3 nights. The fever didn't just come, it laid siege to him. Clara pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. It was her last clean rag. Her last jar of honey, saved for a Christmas miracle, was gone. Dissolved in the bitter tea she forced between his cracked lips. Tommy watched from the loft, his eyes never leaving the man. He was trying to decide. Was this man a threat? Or was he something else? Grant's delirium was a window. A terrifying, broken window into a life she couldn't imagine. "The northern ridge, it's mine," he'd mutter, his voice thick. "Jed. Damn you, Jed." And then, the name, over and over. "Elizabeth. I should have been there. Our baby girl. Our little Rose. Forgive me, Elizabeth. Forgive me." His voice would break on the name, a raw, ragged sound of pure grief. Clara understood grief. It was a language she spoke fluently. It was the air she breathed. She worked through the exhaustion. Her back ached, her eyes burned from smoke and lack of sleep. She changed cloths. She spooned the last of their broth into him when he could swallow. Her supplies dwindled. The flour sack was almost flat. The woodpile was shrinking. If he didn't recover soon, or if he didn't die soon, they would all starve. Together. It was a horrible thought, and she pushed it away. On the fourth morning, the fever hadn't broken, and a knock shattered the frozen silence. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was hard, sharp, and judgmental. Clara froze. Tommy scrambled down the ladder, putting himself between her and the door. "Who is it?" Clara called, her voice trembling. "It's Mrs. Kent, Clara. Open this door. I know you're in there." Mrs. Warren Kent, the town's self-appointed conscience, a woman whose tongue was sharper than a skinning knife. Clara pulled the bar. Mrs. Kent stood on the threshold, a blizzard of her own. She held a loaf of charity bread in one hand and a whole lot of judgment in her eyes. "Clara Brennan," she began, her voice like cracking ice. "I heard you've taken in—" She stopped, mid-sentence. Her eyes shot past Clara, past the small, cold cabin, and landed on the bed, on the massive, bruised man lying in it. Her thin lips disappeared. "A man, under your roof, with your children, Clara. Have you no shame?" Clara's exhaustion, her fear, her hunger, it all boiled over into a white-hot fury. "He was dying, Martha, in the snow. What was I supposed to do? Let the wolves have him?" "Let the Lord sort it," Mrs. Kent snapped. "That's what a decent woman would do, not this. You have invited scandal to your door." "The Lord helps those who help themselves," Clara shot back, surprised at her own venom. "And sometimes those who help others." Mrs. Kent's gaze was ice. "People will talk, Clara. A widow alone. A strange man. They're already talking." "Then let them talk," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I can't hear gossip over the wind. Now, are you going to stand there and let the cold in, or are you leaving?" Mrs. Kent looked like she'd been slapped. She shoved the bread into Clara's hands. "You'll regret this, child. You mark my words." She turned and marched away, her back rigid with indignation. Clara slammed the door and barred it. She leaned against it, the bread forgotten in her hand. She knew, with a sickening certainty, that the damage was done. By sunset, the whole town wouldn't just know she was harboring a stranger. They'd know she was a harlot, a fallen woman. Her reputation, already as fragile as ice on the creek, had just shattered. That night, the stranger's fever finally broke. He fell into a deep, natural sleep. Clara wept silently by the dying fire. The relief was so profound it hurt. But just as she was about to climb into the loft to sleep, he murmured something new, something that wasn't about Elizabeth or Jed. "The deed. Clyde can't have it. He's working with Jed. He knows. About Elizabeth. He knows." She dismissed it. Fever talk. Just jumbled words. But Tommy, crouched in the dark of the loft, heard every word, and he didn't dismiss it. He memorized it. Something was wrong, something far more dangerous than town gossip, and they were trapped, right in the middle of it. Grant McCoy woke to sunlight, weak, watery sunlight, but it was sunlight, not the red-black hell of fever. He tried to sit up. Pain, hot and sharp, lanced through his skull. He collapsed back onto the cot with a groan. "Easy," a voice said. He turned his head. A woman, sitting by the fire. She was mending his coat, the fine wool one. Her hands moved with a practiced, efficient rhythm. Every stitch was a small, perfect act of defiance. "You've been mostly dead for 6 days," she said, not looking up. 6 days. His voice was gravel. "Where? Where am I?" "My cabin, Montana Territory, in case you forgot." She set the coat down. Her needles were silent. She finally looked at him. Her eyes. God, her eyes. They were the color of a winter sky, and they held a weariness he recognized. It was the same weariness he saw in the mirror every morning. But there was something else in there, too. Something he hadn't seen in a long, long time. Strength. Pure, unbending steel. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was flat. No kindness in it. "And who wants you dead?" He studied her. Late 20s, maybe. 30. Beautiful, but not in the soft way of city women. This was a beauty carved by wind and loss and hard work. "Grant McCoy," he said. He watched for a reaction. Nothing. The name meant nothing to her. I own a ranch near Bozeman." "A big one?" "The biggest. 3 counties." That got a reaction. Her face went pale. Her knuckles turned white where she gripped the coat. She hadn't just saved a stranger. She'd saved a millionaire. He told her, haltingly, the words tasting like ash. He'd been riding to Miles City to file a land deed. The northern ridge, prime grazing land worth a fortune. 3 men ambushed him. He recognized one. "Jed," Clara whispered. Grant's head snapped up. "How did you talk in your sleep?" He nodded, a grim, sick feeling in his stomach. "Jed Murphy, my neighbor. He's been trying to buy that land for years. I always refused." Grant's jaw tightened so hard it ached. "Guess he decided to take it." Clara was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. "Your people must be looking for you," she said. "Maybe." Grant's gaze was steady. "Or maybe they think I'm dead. Easier that way for some." He heard the bitterness in his own voice. He recognized it in her eyes. "You lost someone," he stated. It wasn't a question. Her throat tightened. He saw her swallow. "My husband, Jacob, 2 winters back, froze to death mending a fence line, right where my boy found you." She looked away, but not before he saw the glint of tears. "I found him at dawn," she whispered. "Too late." Their eyes met. 2 strangers, 2 souls scraped raw by the same relentless grief. "You're strong enough to leave," Clara said, her voice careful, brittle. "Your people." "And if I don't want to?" Grant interrupted. The question hung between them, thick as smoke. Clara thought of Mrs. Kent's face, the judgment, the whispers that would now be circling the town like wolves. The danger this man had brought. She should send him away, protect her children, protect herself. Instead, she heard herself say, "Then I reckon you stay, till the spring thaw, till you're strong enough to ride." Grant's expression shifted. Surprise. Then something warmer. Something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Relief. Or maybe hope. Outside, a single bird called, the first robin of a false spring. Winter was cracking. But so was the wall around Clara's heart. And she was terrified, absolutely terrified of what might break through. "Why?" Grant asked, his voice quiet. "Why'd you save me? You don't know me. I could be." "A bad man," she finished, picking up his coat. She resumed her stitching. "My boy asked the same thing." She tied off a thread with her teeth. "Because the world's got enough cold in it," she said, her eyes on her work. "Didn't need me adding more." Grant watched her work, her small, chapped hands moving with such purpose. For the first time in years, the crushing ache in his chest wasn't grief. It was something else entirely. Something he'd thought was dead and buried right alongside Elizabeth. Hope. And it scared him more than Jed Murphy's guns. But then, a new thought. A cold, dreadful realization. She'd saved him. A poor widow. Her supplies were gone. Her cabin was bare. He'd seen it. He'd eaten her last jar of honey. He'd burned her wood. And he, Grant McCoy, owned the very bank that held the note on this land. He knew it. He'd seen the survey maps. The Brennan plot. Jacob Brennan, deceased. Note in default. He hadn't connected the name. Clara Brennan. His bank. His manager in Miles City. They were days away from foreclosing on her. He was staying in the house of a woman his own company was about to throw into the snow. He said nothing. What could he say? By the way, thank you for saving my life, and I'm about to destroy yours. He kept his mouth shut, and the lie sat between them, heavier than the snow on the roof. He was a coward. The first few days he was useless. He could barely stand. But Grant McCoy wasn't a man who knew how to be idle. On the third day of being awake, he swung the axe. He was clumsy. His muscles screamed. The wound on his head throbbed with every swing. Clara watched from the cabin doorway, her arms crossed. Her face was unreadable. He was mending her fence, the one Jacob had died trying to fix. He refused to be an invalid. He refused to be a burden, more than he already was. He split logs until his hands, soft from years of signing papers, were raw and bleeding. He didn't stop. He repaired the cabin roof, the leak she'd lived with for months, the one that dripped on her bed. He fixed it in an afternoon. He taught Tommy how to whittle. He sat by the fire, his big hands surprisingly gentle, and carved a small, perfect wolf for the boy. Tommy's eyes, so full of suspicion, finally softened. They shined. Liliane, who hadn't spoken more than 2 words to him, started following him. She'd sit on the woodpile, a small, silent shadow, and just watch. Clara felt her guard slipping. The wall she'd built, brick by painful brick, was crumbling, and she hated herself for it. Hate was safer. Hate didn't get you killed. One evening, the wolves came back, not just howling. They were circling. The chickens were screaming. Clara grabbed the rifle from over the mantel. It was heavy, and her hands shook. But Grant was faster. He moved in a blur. He snatched the rifle from her, his body, still weak, moving with a predator's grace. He didn't shoulder the gun. He kicked open the door, stepped onto the porch, and fired from the hip. Crack. The sound echoed, flat and final, across the snow. The howling stopped, replaced by a single high-pitched yelp. Then silence. Clara peered into the darkness. The alpha wolf lay in the snow, a dark stain spreading around its head. A single shot, through the eye, in the dark. The rest of the pack scattered, their howls fading into the distance. Clara's hand was at her throat. She was shaking. "Thank you." Grant reloaded the rifle. The click-clack of the mechanism was loud in the sudden silence. "A man protects what's his," he said, his voice low. He paused, stared out into the darkness. "What matters?" The words hung between them, weighed down with 1,000 unspoken things. Neither of them dared to name it. But the town's cruelty was just beginning. When Clara went to the general store for flour, Mr. Henderson, a man who'd known her for 10 years, suddenly wouldn't meet her eye. "Can't extend you any more credit, Clara," he muttered, busying himself with a barrel of pickles. "I'm not asking for credit, Silas. I have money, from my mending. We're out of flour. I can see 3 sacks of it right behind you." Henderson's face turned red. "I can't serve your kind in here, Clara. People are talking. Bad for business." Her kind. The preacher's wife crossed the street to avoid her. At school, the children, repeating the poison they'd heard from their parents, surrounded Tommy. He came home with a black eye and a split lip. He wouldn't cry. He just stood in front of the fire, refusing to meet her eyes. "What happened?" Clara whispered, her hands gentle as she cleaned the blood from his face. "They called you a harlot," he said, his voice quiet and dead. "Said you were. With that man. For money." Clara cried that night. She hid in the barn, the one place that still felt like hers, and muffled her sobs in her apron. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd saved a life. An act of simple, basic decency, and the world was punishing her for it. She heard the crunch of snow. Grant was standing in the doorway. He didn't speak. He just came in and sat on the hay bale beside her. His presence was solid, steady. "People will bury you for being kind," he said finally, his voice rough. The land don't care. The land'll bury you just the same, rich or poor, saint or sinner. But people, they'll bury you just for not letting another man freeze. He looked at her, his blue eyes sharp in the moonlight. Don't let them, Clara. She wiped her eyes, her voice raw. And what am I supposed to do, Grant? Fight the whole town? His gaze was unwavering. You're not alone. That night he carved a small, perfect horse for Liliane. He sanded it smooth by the firelight, his brow furrowed in concentration. Clara watched him from the loft ladder, her heart hammering so hard she thought he'd hear it. She was falling. Slowly, terribly, inevitably falling. And it terrified her more than wolves, more than starvation, more than the town. Wolves run in packs, she thought. You know where you stand. But what happens when you find your pack? Too late? Grant looked up. His eyes met hers in the dim light. He'd caught her watching. Neither of them spoke, but something passed between them. Fragile, precious, dangerous. A promise neither of them was ready to make. The lie about the bank festered in Grant's gut. He'd tried to tell her, 10 times. He'd open his mouth. Clara, there's something about my bank. But the words wouldn't come. How could he? He was a guest in her home, a man she had saved, and he was her executioner. He was waiting for, he didn't know what. A miracle. The miracle that arrived came on horseback. Clyde Harper. He rode up with 3 men, not ranch hands. These were men in city suits, with polished boots that sank in the spring mud. Clyde dismounted. His face was a mask of practiced grief. He was Grant's brother-in-law, Elizabeth's brother, and his lawyer. Mr. McCoy, he said, his voice smooth as silk. We thought you were dead. Grant stood on Clara's small porch, his arms crossed. He was wearing Jacob's old barn coat. He felt more himself than he had in years. I was, Grant said, his voice flat. Got better. Clyde's smile didn't reach his cold gray eyes. We need to discuss business, privately. Inside the cabin, the air was thick. Clara had taken the children to check traps. Clyde laid it out. Jed Murphy, Grant's cousin, was claiming the northern ridge. He'd filed paperwork, said Grant had abandoned the land. Without the original deed, the claim was vulnerable. He's a thief, Grant growled. He's family, Clyde said smoothly, and right now he has a stronger claim than you do. You've been missing, presumed dead, incapacitated. Clyde leaned forward. His eyes flicked to Clara's mending basket. And staying here, he said, his voice dropping, in this place with her. It damages your standing, Grant. It damages your reputation. She saved my life. She's a gold digger, Grant. The whole town knows it. She's a harlot who found you and is bleeding you dry. Surely you see the optics. I see a woman, Grant said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low, who didn't leave me to die. That's all the optics I need. Then where's your deed? Clyde shot back. Without it, you have no proof. Jed wins. Your empire, the one you built for Elizabeth, goes to the man who tried to kill you. Grant's jaw tightened. He'd been carrying it. In his saddlebag. Or his coat. He couldn't remember. Lost in the attack. Gone. Clyde was right. Without the deed, he was ruined. After Clyde left, promising to handle things in town, Grant sat by the fire. He was a king with no crown, an emperor with no empire. Years of work. Gone. Clara found him staring into the flames, his face a mask of defeat. I heard, she said quietly from the doorway. Then you know I'm leaving, he said, not looking at her. Have to. Settle this. Legally. Clara's face hardened. That wall she'd been fighting, it slammed back into place. Then go. But her eyes screamed, don't. She disappeared into the back room. He heard her rummaging. She returned, holding something in her hand. A blood-stained, frozen leather pouch. His. "When you came here," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you were clutching this. In your hand. Wouldn't let it go. Not even in the fever. I thought it might be important." Grant's hands shook. He took the pouch. His fingers brushed hers. He opened it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the deed. Intact. Legal. His. "Clara," he breathed, "you saved. You saved more than my life." Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "I saved you, Grant. The paper is just paper." The moment stretched, charged. From the loft, a small grin. "Tommy." But the moment broke. Grant stood up, the deed in his hand. He was Grant McCoy again. Powerful. Rich. "I have to go," he said, his voice different. Firm. "I have to file this. I have to stop Jed." Clara's expression shuddered, then froze. "Then go," she repeated. This time the words were armor. He wanted to explain that he'd come back, that this wasn't him leaving her. But Clyde's warning echoed. It damages her. Staying damages them both. Leaving was the right thing. The honorable thing. So why did it feel like the most profound act of cowardice in his entire life? That night, neither of them slept. In separate rooms, separated by a thin wooden wall and a mile of fear, they both stared into the darkness. A stranger's just a friend you ain't met yet, Clara thought, her hands clenched. Or an enemy waiting to show himself. Which one was Grant McCoy? She still didn't know. The next day, the schoolhouse door didn't just close. It slammed in Tommy's face. "No room for the likes of you," the teacher, Mrs. Gable, said. Behind her, other mothers clutched their children, as if Tommy carried the plague. Clara's world was crumbling. Jed Murphy and Clyde Harper hadn't just stayed in town. They had weaponized the gossip. Clara wasn't just a harlot. She was a gold digger, a con artist. She'd lured Grant, faked the rescue. She was bleeding him dry. The lies spread like wildfire, fueled by Jed's money and Clyde's smooth legal authority. And then, the final blow. The bank. His bank. The notice was nailed to her door. Foreclosure. Jacob's old debt. Called in. She had 30 days to pay. 30 days to come up with a sum she couldn't make in 10 years. 30 days. Or lose the land. Grant, standing on her porch with the deed in his hand, said nothing. He was torn. Torn between protecting her and reclaiming the life he'd almost lost. Clyde pressed him. Hard. "Leave her, Grant, or lose everything. Your reputation, your ranch, your legacy. She's poison. Jed will use her to prove you're incompetent, that she's controlling you." "I won't be able to stop him." Grant looked at Clara, his face a mask of indecision, and his silence was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. It was the sound of her world ending. That night, fire lit the horizon. A different kind of fire, not the warm glow of her hearth. This was red and angry. "The barn!" Tommy screamed. Grant and Tommy ran. They burst through the doors. The flames were already licking the rafters. They freed the animals. The old milk cow screaming in terror. The chickens scattering like feathered fireworks. But the structure, it was old, dry. It collapsed in a roar of sparks and timber. In the ashes as the sun came up, Clara found it. A piece of scorched wood, with a note carved into it with a knife. "Leave widow, or next time it's the house." She stood there, soot-streaked, hollow. Grant approached, his face stricken. "Clara, you should go," she said, her voice flat, dead. "They'll kill us. They'll kill my children. To hurt you." "I can protect you," he said, his voice desperate. "Can you?" Her laugh was like broken glass. "You can't even decide if you're staying or leaving." He grabbed his fine wool coat, the one she had mended. Liliane, who had been silent through the whole thing, burst into tears. "Don't leave," she shrieked, grabbing his leg. "Don't leave like Papa. Don't leave." Grant knelt, his voice breaking. "I'm not leaving you, sweetheart. I'm protecting you. I have to go." "Then you're a coward," Clara's final blow, quiet, deadly. "You're a coward, Grant McCoy. I thought you were different. But you're just like all of them." He packed his bag in silence. At dawn, he mounted the horse Clyde had brought him. He rode away, and he never once looked back. Clara stood in the doorway, her children clutching her skirts. The cabin had never felt emptier. The world had never been colder. Winter had returned, inside her chest. The ranch house echoed, 20 rooms, fine carpets, expensive furniture, and not an ounce of life in any of it. It was a mausoleum. Grant wandered the halls, the deed in his hand, feeling like a ghost. Eli Red, his foreman, found him in the stable. Eli was deaf. He'd been with Grant for 20 years. He'd lost his hearing in a cattle stampede, but he read lips like a scholar. And he read hearts even better. He saw Grant standing there, staring at an empty stall. Eli signed, his hands sharp and angry. "You've been dead for 2 years, boss. Buried yourself with her." Grant flinched. "That woman, the widow. She brought you back. I saw it in your eyes." Eli's hands moved faster. "Now you're here, and you're dead again. You're going to die again." Grant had no answer. He visited Elizabeth's grave that afternoon. A massive marble angel stood guard. He knelt in the dirt, his expensive hat in his hands. "I failed you, Liza," he whispered. "I failed our daughter. And now I'm failing them." He opened the small mausoleum, something he hadn't done since the funeral. Inside, a trunk. Her things, his hands rough and calloused from Clara's axe, found their daughter's baby blanket. Still soft, wrapped inside, was a letter. Elizabeth's handwriting. "Grant, my love, if you are reading this, I am gone. Do not let this be the end of you. Do not bury yourself with me. Our time was beautiful, but it is over. Find someone. Find a reason. Live, Grant. For me. Live. Promise me." He read it 3 times, the paper blurring through his tears. She was giving him permission, setting him free. But miles away, was the lock on Clara's heart still open? Or had he, in his cowardice, slammed it shut for good? Clara sat on her cot, staring at the foreclosure notice. 30 days. She had 20 left. She had nothing. Tommy, desperate, paced the small cabin. "Mama, maybe we should have let him help. Maybe he could have." "A man who leaves when it's hard," Clara said, her voice hollow, "ain't worth having." But Lily Ann, wise beyond her 6 years, came and sat beside her. She touched the mended coat, Grant's coat, which he'd left behind. It was still hanging by the door. "Papa left 'cause he had to, Mama. The angels took him." She looked up, her big eyes searching Clara's. "Mr. Grant left 'cause he was scared, but scared people can come back, can't they?" Clara looked at the coat. She'd pushed him away. She'd called him a coward. She'd done it to protect herself, to hurt him before he could hurt her more. "Maybe," she thought, her heart aching, "maybe I'm the coward." By the small light of the fire, she made her choice. She would fight, for her land, for her children, with or without him. At Elizabeth's grave, Grant McCoy made his. He would go back. He would beg. He would fight, even if she shot him on sight. 2 broken people, miles apart, choosing courage at the exact same time. The only thing worse than being alone, Eli had signed, is being surrounded by folks and still feeling it. Grant mounted his horse, not the fine stallion Clyde had given him, his old Mustang. He turned toward Clara's cabin. It was time to stop running. He rode all night. He didn't spare the horse. But as he crested the ridge, as the sun began to bleed purple into the sky, he saw it. A glow. An orange, angry glow. It wasn't the sunrise. It was coming from Clara's cabin. He spurred his horse, his heart a cold stone of dread in his chest. It wasn't the barn this time. It was the house. The entire cabin was engulfed in flames. He heard a scream. Lily-Ann. He launched himself from the horse before it even stopped, ripping his jacket off. Clara, Tommy. He saw them, huddled by the creek. Safe. But Clara was screaming his name. Grant! Tommy! He went back for the horse. Grant's blood turned to ice. He looked at the burning cabin. The roof was about to go. And then he saw him, Tommy, standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the inferno. He was holding the small carved wooden wolf Grant had made him. He was frozen in terror. Tommy! Grant roared. A beam crashed down, blocking the door. Tommy was trapped inside. Clara screamed, a raw animal sound of pure agony. Grant didn't think. He wrapped his coat around his head and he ran. He hit the burning wall of the porch with his full weight, crashing through the railing. He scooped Tommy up in one arm. The boy was light, too light. Hold on, he yelled. He turned. The doorway was gone, a wall of fire. The window, he roared. He ran to the small window, the one he'd reglazed just a week before. He didn't slow down. He tucked Tommy's head against his chest and he jumped. Glass shattered, wood splintered. They landed in a snowbank, rolling, smoking. Grant's back and arms were on fire. He beat at the flames, hissing in pain. Tommy was coughing, his face black with soot, but he was alive. Clara was on them in a second, smothering the embers on Grant's shirt, her hands shaking. You're... She was sobbing. I'm here, he gasped, pulling her and the children close. And that's when they heard the click, the sound of a dozen rifles being cocked. Well, well, a voice drawled. Look what the fire spat out. Jed Murphy, stepping out from behind the trees. With him was Clyde Harper, and the town sheriff, and 5 hired guns. It's a shame, Clyde said, his voice full of false pity. A terrible accident. The widow and her children, and the poor, crazy rancher who thought he was Grant McCoy, all lost in the fire. Grant stood up, pushing Clara behind him. It's over, Jed, he said, his voice low. It's just beginning, Jed snarled, raising his rifle. This time I won't leave you to the wolves. No, Grant said. You won't. Clack, clack. Another sound. From the woods. Behind Jed, Eli Red stepped out of the trees, and with him were 30 of Grant's ranch hands, all armed, all loyal. Jed's face went white. Clyde dropped his pistol. Eli, Grant said, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. You're late. Eli signed, his face grim. Got lost, but I found this. He tossed a small leather-bound book at Grant's feet, Elizabeth's diary. What is that? Clyde whispered, his composure shattering. Grant opened it and read the last entry. Clyde is poisoning me, slow, with my medicine. He says it's for my grief, but I'm weaker. He's been working with Jed. They're stealing Grant's money. If I die, it was him. It was my brother. A collective gasp from the ranch hands. The sheriff, seeing the tide turn with the speed of a flash flood, turned his gun on Clyde. Clyde Harper, the sheriff boomed. You're under arrest for the murder of your sister, Elizabeth McCoy. Clyde lunged, not for a gun, for the diary. Eli's boot caught him in the chest. He went down, hard. Jed raised his rifle. You'll never take. Whack. Tommy. He'd crept up and swung a burning piece of firewood, hitting Jed square in the back of the knees. Jed screamed and crumpled. It was over. Sunday. The whole town was in church. They were praying for the soul of the poor, departed widow, Clara Brennan. And then the church doors opened. Clara Brennan walked in, alive, clean, her head held high, Tommy and Lily Ann on either side of her. The town gasped. Mrs. Kent dropped her hymn book, and behind her, Grant McCoy. His hands were bandaged, his face was scorched, but he was alive. He walked down the aisle, his boots echoing in the sudden, profound silence. He didn't stop at a pew. He walked right up to the pulpit. "You thought I was dead," he said, his voice carried to the back pews. "I was. I was dead for 2 years, until this woman," he pointed to Clara, "and her children pulled me from the snow." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She saved my life, without knowing my name, without asking for a single thing." He swept his gaze across their faces. The Hendersons, the Gables, Mrs. Kent. "And you," he said, his voice like ice, "you repaid her with slander, with cruelty, with fire." He slammed the deed down on the pulpit. "This is the deed to the Northern Ridge. It's mine." He then held up Elizabeth's diary. "And this is the confession of the man who murdered my wife and tried to murder me. My own lawyer, Clyde Harper, and my own cousin, Jed Murphy." The church erupted. "But I'm the real coward here." Grant's voice dropped, but everyone heard him. "I left this woman when she needed me most, because I was scared. Scared to lose again. Scared to be happy." He turned, walked off the pulpit. He walked down the aisle to where Clara stood, and he knelt in front of the entire town. "Clara Brennan," he said, his voice thick, "I'm asking you, not as a millionaire, as a man who has nothing, nothing, without you." He took her chapped, calloused hand. "Let me stay. Let me help you rebuild. Not your barn, not your house." He looked up, his blue eyes shining with tears. "Us." Clara's own tears spilled over. You came back, into the fire." "I was a coward," he whispered, "for her alone. But I'm done being a coward." "You already changed, Grant," she whispered back, her hand tightening on his. "The moment you rode back." She pulled him to his feet. The church was silent. Then an old man in the back stood up. Henry Doyle. He and his wife took in strays. "We'll help rebuild the barn," he called out, his voice firm. The blacksmith stood. "I'll bring tools. And my boys." The schoolteacher, Mrs. Gable, her face red with shame. "Tommy, Lily Ann, your seats. Your seats are waiting for you, front row." Even Mrs. Kent, she stood, her face pale and just nodded. The preacher, finally finding his voice, smiled. "Well, looks like we've got a wedding to plan." Grant pulled Clara close, right there in the aisle. He whispered in her ear. "I promise to stay every storm, every spring," Clara whispered back, her tears soaking his scorched shirt. "And I promise to let you." Courage, she thought, her heart so full it might burst. It wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what was right even when your hands were shaking. They were both shaking. And they were both home. The garden was Grant's idea. "We're ranchers, Grant, not farmers," Clara had laughed. But here they were, side by side, hands in the dirt. 6 weeks had passed. Late April had brought wildflowers and a warmth that felt permanent. Tommy and Lily Ann chased chickens across the yard, their laughter bright and loud. The new cabin stood on the hill, solid and strong. It had 4 rooms now. Over the door, a new carved sign, McCoy Brennan Ranch. Clara had kept her name. Grant insisted. "Partners," he'd said. "Equal." The wedding had been simple. Vows spoken under the big cottonwood, the one where Tommy had found him. Clara wore a simple blue dress. Grant's voice had shaken when he read his vows. Eli Red played the fiddle. Mrs. Kent brought a pie, her way of apologizing. The whole town came, humbled, healed. Now, planting rows of vegetables, Grant grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. People still talk, you know, Clara teased, planting a seed. Let 'em, Grant said, pulling her close, dirt and all. We've weathered worse than gossip. Have we? We survived winter, didn't we? Clara laughed. The sound was new, bright. Barely. Barely's enough. Lily-Ann ran up, her hands full of wildflowers. Mama, Mr. Grant, look, I planted these where the old cabin was. Daisies, Indian paintbrush, scattered like stars in the black soot. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Grant said, his voice thick. They'll grow back every year, Lily-Ann said solemnly. Even when we're old. Tommy joined them, the carved wolf tucked in his belt. He looked at Grant, his gaze steady. Papa would have liked you, Mr. Grant. Grant's throat tightened. I wish I could have known him, son. You do, Tommy said simply. You're fixing the things he couldn't. Mama smiles now. Clara's eyes burned. She turned away, but Grant caught her hand. That evening they stood on the new porch. The mountains were gold. A distant wolf howl drifted on the wind. Grant wrapped an arm around her. She leaned into him. Solid, certain. Spring came hard this year, Clara murmured. It did, but it came. And we're still standing. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the stars. Think we'll make it? Grant kissed her forehead. The land remembers, Clara. It remembers who stood when the storm came, and it gives back. That's not an answer. Yes, he said simply. We'll make it. Inside, they could hear Tommy and Lily-Ann arguing over a game of checkers. Normal, messy, beautiful. Clara closed her eyes, breathed deep, wood smoke, and pine. Home. You know what Jacob used to say? She whispered. What? That a man's word is his bond, and his bond is all he's got. Grant's voice was steady. Then I'm the richest man in Montana, Clara Brennan McCoy. Because my word, is yours, till the last star falls. She believed him. The wolves howled again, closer. But the door was barred, the fire was bright, and they were together. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next.